All right, it's still good night. It's still April 30th, 2024. It's now 11:29 p.m. I'm about to turn 55 and I'm having fun making these videos, so this is kind of cool. Let's continue to talk about chapter 2 of my UAP book. What are they not doing? And we're still going down the list of the capabilities that these UAPs have and the way human beings tend to use them and how the UAPs are not doing this. So my throat's getting a little dry. I got some decaf cold black tea. I didn't start off cold, but All right, coercive capability. Coercion is an interesting thing, and there's a lot of gray lines here. So, for example, if you one human being to another, let's say I had some kind of power over you, I had the power to hurt you or help you, and I had greater protection than you had, I could threaten you. That everybody knows that's coercion. That's like bullying. I'll hit you with one of these if you don't give me your lunch money. But I could also coerce you in different ways. I could be like, hey, those guys over there that are bullying you, if you don't give me what I want, um, I'll help them. All right, or I'll pay this guy to hurt you, or I could be like, hey, if you do what I want, I'm gonna use my greater power to stop those guys from bullying you. I'll solve that problem, but there's a price for it, right? So, and it could be all the way down to, you know, verbal, just catastrophizing with you. Hey, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. I could exaggerate the risks. Or, hey, if you do this, you're going to get this. I could exaggerate the rewards, although that's a little bit more on the area of persuasion. So how does this apply to UAP technology and, a non-human hypothesis of origin? So we're going to talk, here are some of the ways in which coercive capability, which is related to persuasive capability, paying, industrial capacity, technological trade, flooding markets, funding partisans, influencers, offering better standard of living, proxies, vassals, and so on and so forth. So that's a lot. I cover it in paragraphs and paragraphs on this, but I'm going to try and give you some of the basic concepts. Simply offering money, possibly to an enemy of yours, right, is a form of coercion. And I'll be like, hey, I'm funding this person, or, maybe they need to make cars. They have a shortage of cars in their country, but they don't have the industrial capacity. I'm like, look, my factories are 20 times as efficient as yours because we don't have to burn charcoal and petrol. If you take care of if you attack this country, if you raid them or something, then, or if you become my security force or my offensive force, I'll solve your car problem. I'll take care of your energy grid. You'll never have to pay the electric bills you used to pay for, and so on and so forth. Okay, I can do all these things. I can threaten to flood a market, for example, if you're someone that makes pottery and you're like a very successful pottery company, just to mess with you, I could be like, you know what, I'm going to use this technology to gather a whole bunch of raw materials in an exponentially more efficient manner, and then I'm going to flood the market with pottery that is far cheaper than yours but of the same quality, maybe even better, unless you do what I say, right? So that is kind of low grade coercion using some degree of threat or force. But then you've got higher grade. One of the most simple things we could do, a human agency that has greater power and capacity, is they can pay partisans, they can get vassals and use proxies. The United States and Russia did this throughout the Cold War. And they had allies, and the main driving force was the U.S. because we have had an incredible industrial capacity, and unlike most of the world, I mean, a lot of people don't understand what made the U.S. so successful, and they're like, well, it was capitalism or it was our Constitution. Not even close. The United States, this whole continent, was unexploited. I mean, it had a low population density. There was very little mining going on in most of it, no mining. All the minerals, all the petrochemicals were still in the ground by and large. There were thousands and thousands of square miles of forest that hadn't been deforested, places that hadn't been farmed so much that the soil was depleted, so much living space. There were just an entire continent, an entire hemisphere of unexploited resources, unspoiled natural splendor, food, everything. And we got here and we immediately began just basically taking it from the people that lived there, shoving them off their land, colonizing it, and exploiting the crap out of it to the degree where there are still resources here in such great abundance that don't exist anywhere else because most of the rest of the other hemisphere, Asia, Africa, I mean, you have these resources that have been exploited for thousands of years. Even in Africa, there's civilizations that go back there thousands of years. There's mines, there's places that have been mined out, so on and so forth, right? To the point where places that are less exploited or relatively unexploited, like Afghanistan, are battleground places, right? Make no mistake about it, things like the Crusades, the European and American interventions in Afghanistan, there's a degree of resources about it. And people are like, why do we fight the Vietnam War? Was it just about communism versus capitalism? I want to state this. Capitalism is not a form of government. It's a form of interaction between corporations and a government to manage or not manage economies and industries. It's not a form of government. But it was perceived of as the Cold War, which I participated in on the side of the U.S. and the West. It was perceived of as a battle between communism and capitalism. And Vietnam has some of the greatest deposits of titanium in the world, and titanium is crucial for aerospace, for air forces and navies and space technology. Make no mistake, Vietnam was a critical battleground. All right. So, examples from our past are abundant, but I'm going to focus on about 3 areas that have been important in the 20th century and in this 21st century, and probably will be important for the conceivable future. You have, for example, the Israeli situation. I mean, the U.S. and England didn't directly invade Palestine, but we, were instrumental in setting up and maintaining the state of Israel, which, believe it or not, I think one reason why we do that is that it destabilizes the Mideast and stops, provides a huge check on the power of the Middle Eastern states there, and provides a foothold there. And, by keeping those areas unstable and weaker and giving them a threat of nuclear annihilation if they band together and attack Israel, we, by default, get more powerful, right? So the U.S. doesn't directly bomb anybody in Gaza, but a lot of those bombs were made in the USA. A lot of Arab countries that are ruled by despots have been funded and armed by the U.S. at one time or another, and still are. And, the resentment the locals might have towards what are really our proxies and vassals also comes to us. Again, this is not something I'm making up. I mean, conservatives have even said this is what we're doing. Okay, so this is not a left or right issue. This is factual information. Um, we also have the Kurdish situations. So, for example, the Kurds have, by and large, been enemies of the Turkish state for quite a long time. And during the Cold War, actually, they were funded by the Soviet Union and the communist bloc countries. And then after the Cold War, they were more independent. And then a lot of the same people, the same militias, either the same entities, received the backing of the U.S. because they were opposed to the Iraqis, or the same people disbanded this particular militia or terrorist group, call it however way you want to label it, and said, okay, we're no longer on the list of terrorist groups. We're a new group. Same people, same goals, same tactics, right? And for a while, it was being flooded with U.S. money and some European money, but largely U.S. And it caused a huge amount of friction between the U.S. and Turkey, where I was born. So I see multiple sides of this issue from multiple angles, and it's a labyrinth, right? But they're like, we thought you were our allies. We backed you up during Desert Storm and the Cold War, and now your money is being used to fund people that are committing terrorist acts against us, right? So that is what is called war by proxy. Now, what if we talked about the incredible industrial power and unexploited resources of the U.S. and how that made us a global superpower, right? It made Spain a global superpower. Spain extracted, when they colonized here, they extracted so much silver from the Americas after conquering the Aztec Empire, what was in Peru, the Inca Empire, and Mayans, and so on and so forth, that it actually destabilized their economy. It caused a drop in silver prices, and they got so rich it hurt them, right? And that silver was used to fund the Spanish Armada, and then Britain colonized Africa and the U.S. and used that to become even more powerful and conquer even more countries, and they fought with Spain and so on and so forth, right? These resources and energy capacities fund coercion and coercion by proxy. Well, can you imagine if this incredible technology the UAPs had fell into any country's power? What if, for example, the Palestinians got a hold of that much power? They would not be so weak in comparison to the Israelis, right? What if an African nation or a coalition of African nations got a hold of this power, and all of a sudden they've got better industry and military technology and medical capacity than the U.S., right? Think about it. Some things are expensive to do. What if all of a sudden a country that had formerly been weak was able to do everything every other country could on a far more cheaper basis, on a far bigger scale, faster, more efficiently, and with greater quality? What if that happened overnight? Well, even if it happened over the course of 20 years, it would completely transform politics, because human beings always use this capacity to further their ends. It's simply not showing up. Again, this points towards what's happening with UAPs appears not to be at all in human origin, because there is no evidence of human psychology and tendencies showing up. And final example of that war by proxy, coercive capacity, is the Aztecs. When the Spaniards got here, there were not a lot of them, and yet, they were able to bring the Aztecs down. Part of that was smallpox or cholera, or one of the diseases or multiple diseases the Spanish brought here, and Aztecs began dying by the thousands, and the Aztec Empire was basically a city-state. Most of its population was in one place, and it was dominating all of its neighbors, and the people they were dominating and oppressing and killing by the thousands, not just in warfare, but in captured in warfare and human sacrifice. They quickly decided, we're going to join these Spaniards because the Aztecs are weakened by these diseases, and Spaniards have this incredible technology. They've got horses, armor, swords. The rest of them were fighting with stone tools and obsidian, possibly copper, and they were able to use the great number of their proxies to even out the amount of numbers and overwhelm the Aztecs, and they took over. You understand? So that's something to think about, right? There was an example of botched attempts at this. For example, in World War II, the Japanese were talking about creating a co-prosperity sphere in Asia where they would help liberate the Asian nations from American and European colonizations and raise the Asians up in this great coalition of prosperity and cooperation. And quickly what happened was the Japanese turned out to be as oppressive or more oppressive than the oppressors that had been there before, and they had a feeling of racial and cultural superiority and began slaughtering and oppressing the Chinese, the Filipinos, and immediately they began to rise up, and the U.S. and the Allies began funding them and helping them and sending them military advisors and using them as proxies against the Japanese. The same people that wanted the Americans and Europeans gone were like, we're going to take your help in this. And afterwards, although these countries achieved independence, the U.S. for quite some time, and in some countries to this day, had a strong coercive and persuasive influence over these countries, right? So this coercive capability, there's endless ways to use it, and it is something a greater power would grant somebody. What if, for example, a nation like Mali or Libya or Cameroon in Africa has been colonized for a long time, and the Western powers often murder strong leaders and effective leaders. So that's an issue. What if one of those countries got a hold of UAP technology and they could effectively shut out any foreign nation? The U.S. could send aircraft carrier task forces and they could simply sink them overnight and down all the fighters. What if they could, I don't know, make a force field to stop even nuclear weapons from coming in? And then they use this power to produce industry, help their agriculture, go into space and extract water from comets, and make a highly industrialized, lush place for them to live. That wealth, that power, would give them the ability to take over or pay to be vassals of them, the rest of Africa and the Mideast and so on and so forth. Again, a country that has this capacity would be using it. And these UAPs appear to be technological, and they're not using any of this in any recognizable way that a human culture would. Now my throat's getting dry, so I'm going to stop for a while and see how I feel. We're going to go on to part 3, which is going to start with persuasive capacity, but honestly it's getting late, and I may just want to wind down and get ready for tomorrow morning, which will be my birthday. No huge celebration planned, but I do have a friend of mine. She's going to give me a massage, and I've invited another friend of mine to hang out with me later. And I've got to go to the gym. I want to do some martial arts, and I want to hit the gym. So I do have a big day planned, and let's see how I feel after I drink more tea, and we'll see about part 3. Okay, you all have a good day, and again, persuasive capability and some closing statements are coming up.